Thank you very much, Dr. Hyatt. It's a real privilege for me to be here. I always get excited about the opportunity to talk to junior faculty. I've done this several times, not necessarily for the medical school, but for upper campus as well. Upper campus, for those of you that do not know, means the liberal arts part. There's a whole nother part of the university, which is like history and English and philosophy, which is really fun. Because we're doing this at both places, both at Harvard and at UCLA, I'm going to push a button and put these slides at Harvard, and then I'll go through the lecture. If you have burning questions during this talk, you can interrupt me and I can try to answer them. And Harvard can do the same thing, I think. It may be such that we may want to wait till the end for a bigger discussion. But if something comes up where I'm not clear on something, or you just wonder about something, even if it's not a topic that you see on one of the slides and you've heard a rumor, or you'd like to know what's going on, or who's voting what, and how you can find out who votes who, and I'm happy to try to address those the best I can. So do I push presentation, right? Okay. All right. So this was a slide set that I actually got originally from Howard Reber. Howard Reber was the chair of CAP many years ago. And then I modified them a little bit because things had changed for the university. And Dean Gold had actually looked at them as well and modified them a little bit. So they've been modified a bit over the years, and I really want to thank Howard and Dean Gold for helping me with that. So this is a real important academic form link that you should try to have access to. APO you'll hear about all the time. It's just the Academic Personnel Office. And they have a thing called forms, and this is for your data forms whenever you're going to get appointed, or you're going to come up for a big jump in a merit increase, or you're going to come up for a barrier step. And I'll define those terms as we go along. They're nothing. Barrier step doesn't mean that if you don't make it, you're gone. It's just a term, all right? There is a 8-year limit we can talk a little bit more about for assistant professors, but we'll go from there. But this is a good website to do it. And by the way, if you want to, you can email me, and I'm happy to send you a copy of these slides. So if you don't have to take notes. If you want to, you can take notes, but you don't have to. So what you're going to do in your data summary statement, you get a little data form that you're going to fill out. And we're trying to move this online. It's going to be called Opus. And it's going to start probably in another year and a half. But right now we're dealing with hard copy. So you want to put down your present position and your previous positions on the first form of the data. You want to make sure that the timeline is complete. So what that means is that when you like your curriculum vitae, you don't want to put down when you graduated from kindergarten. I don't need to know that. So, but it would be helpful if we knew when you got your bachelor's degree, and then what happened every year from that point on, whether you went right into graduate school or medical school, or took some time off, or served in the military, or did something else in industry or something, so that all the timeline can be, so your historical history can be replicated by the committee. You get a personal statement. And if there are breaks in periods of time on your chronological history where you actually did something else, here's a time for you to actually explain that. I went to Amgen to work as an assistant researcher for a year or something like that, or I was able to take a period of time and go overseas for a trip or a novel opportunity, something like that. You don't need to put anything there about your personal health or anything like that at all. And we'll talk more about that when we talk or answer questions about things called time off the clock. When you want to list your research grants and fellowships received, you need to list the source, the purpose, the amount, and the dates, and indicate if you're a principal or a co-principal investigator. If you're a principal investigator, it means that you are the contracting officer for the university. The grant does not belong to the faculty. The grant belongs to the university. You as a faculty member act as a contracting officer for the grant. What's your role in the application? How much % time are you listed for your effort? And were these grants or fellowships peer reviewed? Some of you belong to societies that offer fellowships or awards. Were they peer reviewed? Were they competitive? And how were they competitive? The bibliography, you want to list all papers in chronological order with the earliest paper listed first. So research papers are listed as peer-reviewed papers. So what's a peer-reviewed paper? So a peer-reviewed paper is a manuscript that has gone out for peer review by your colleagues from around the country and is ranked in terms of whether it's actually published in a journal or not. It is not an invited review that isn't peer-reviewed, nor is it a letter to the editor. In some points, a case report may not be peer-reviewed. It depends on the journal and how it's actually done. If you're, then you want to list research papers in press. Those papers that are in press are considered just as important as ones that are published. They're gone through the review cycle. You've been told that they're published. The papers will have a number associated with them. If you are funded from the National Institutes of Health or the National Science Foundation, you're required to register it as a number. And the journals do this automatically. Put that number on the data summary sheet or on your CV. Most of these things you can just copy and paste right from your CV onto the data summary sheet. Research papers and press, as I told you, are considered just as important as peer-reviewed. Research papers submitted, this is a difficult thing to do. And generally, my advice to people is to not put down papers that you're submitted or in preparation. You see people do that. Once it gets on the data summary, there are some CAPs or some colleagues which consider that now that's part of that review for that particular time frame. So when you come up for the next review, even though it was in preparation before, you'd like it now it won't be considered where you would like it to be considered. If it's something that's really dramatic and you think that it's going to be important and it may come out or a decision will be out before it reaches a high level of review, there's a period of time, and you can always add things to your dossier before the final review process. But that has to go through the department. It goes through the department and the dean's office, and then from the dean's office up to APO. Okay, you can't take something up and stick it in your file. Okay, if you're not the first or the last author, I would highly recommend that you just write a little sentence under the bottom of each manuscript. What did you do? What was your role? And try not to make it the same for each manuscript. You see these cut and paste and cut and paste. I designed, I wrote the entire study. It was my idea in the first place. Well, then why aren't you first author? No. But what was your role? I helped collect the data, or I helped review the manuscripts or whatnot. In your personal statement, you do not want to underestimate the importance of your personal statement. This is a volunteer position. You don't have to put in a personal statement, but it's highly recommended that you do. This is the chance for you to sort of summarize who you are. If you're a junior faculty member, and we'll go through the ranks and steps and all that business, and you're going to come up for a promotion to an associate level, CAP is going to want to see that you are independent. You have reached the level of independence. Are you publishing with the same person that was your mentor, that you did with your postdoctoral fellowship? Are you publishing with the same person that gave you your degree? Are you publishing with the same person that you worked with in your residency program or your post-residency program? Here you can actually identify, if you're in a big multi-center group, which now is much more common in science, where there are a lot of collaborations going on. What is your little niche? What do you do that's you would carve out, say, this is my role in this collaboration? And that's where you can do that. You want to cover all the major areas that you'll be reviewed on. So everything that has to do with research, teaching, and service. And if you're a physician, you want to comment on patient care. What do you do as a physician? How busy are you? Are you seeing patients 1 week a year? Are you seeing patients every day? I mean, that, people look at that and they say, okay, how much of that effort is being diversified to other areas that could explain certain aspects of the dossier? What you say in the personal statement should match the other parts of the dossier. What you say in the personal statement should match which is in the dossier. That means if you say something something in your personal statement that you've published a paper in Nature and you're very proud of that paper in Nature, and it's not on the list of your biography, that looks really bad, okay? If you say that you were a Rockefeller Fellow or you got an award from the Academy of Medicine and it's not in your data summary, that looks really bad. So try to be consistent. Try to keep it at 3 pages if you can. I've seen personal statements that are 15 pages and really small font. If I have to get out a magnifying glass or if I have to get it in the computer and zoom it up, I get really irritated. And because we have to review every week, we review about 16 cases every week. So it's like 16 personal statements, 16 CVs, 16 deals. And so if you don't know how to do it, maybe it's a good idea to write one and then give it to somebody else in the department who's maybe as your mentor or somebody you can advise. Can you take a look at this? And for my colleagues that are also on the committee from other departments, English is really important here. Okay, grammar, it's just make it easy to read. Letters of reference. When you're going to come up with letters of reference for people, when you come up for your promotion to an associate professor, you have people within the institution and external letters, okay? External letters are letters, we call them extramural letters, letters from outside the institution. And you have the opportunity to choose people for your extramural letters, and then your chair has the opportunity to select people for extramural letters. And they are coded when they go in the dossier, which letter came from your suggestion and which letter came from the chair. Okay? If it's going to from an assistant to an associate level or from an associate to a full level, you'd like to have 10 letters that are combined of intramural and extramural. Those are ones that you send out, and you'll ask your department to send them out. Send out a letter, a solicitation letter, and out of those 10, you hope to get at least 6 or 7, okay? And then people will write back, I don't have time to write this, or I don't know this person that well, or I don't feel qualified, or whatever it is, but you should try to give them 10 to begin to work with. The internal letters come from people within the institution, people that you work with. And sometimes those, those are helpful if you're in a series which places you more in a research or a teaching facility rather than as an independent investigator. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The chair alone is supposed to acquire a significant number of outside references to support your dossier. Now, most of our chairs do a very good job of doing that. There are some chairs that don't know your area. So I'm in neurosurgery, and my chairman knows a little bit about traumatic brain injury, and then I work with the Defense Department and the NFL, and my grants are about metabolism and how the brain responds to traumatic brain injury. But he may not know all the senior experts of the field, and so sometimes the chairs may come and say, can you suggest a few people? So if you're going to do that, try to make them as senior as possible. Don't make them assistant professors. Make them directors of centers or senior as possible. So this is an important, very, very, very important website. And I tell this to all of our faculty in our own department. This is called the CALL, the C-A-L-L, the CALL. And those of you that are employed by the university, by the way, how many of you think you are employed by the university? No. What's the definition of the university? What does a faculty member of a university do? We're supposed to teach the public. We're supposed to do research to help the future. We're supposed to provide service to the university. We're supposed to provide health care. Who does that? You guys do that. So you are the University of California. Okay? So you're actually, in a way, self-employed from that perspective. So if you have an administrator that says you've got to do something because you work for me or for the university, no, they work for you. So the call is a very important document because the call is something that the university and all 9 and this campus has agreed to run our lives by in terms of the academic life. In the call, we'll describe your details of what you've agreed to, your rank, your step, when you can come up, what actions can be taken on your behalf, what actions can be taken against you. If you decide you want to take time off the clock for a particular reason, there are a number of different reasons for do that. What are those reasons? Who has to know? How they, all these things. It's a very good document. It's an enormous document. But the website's set up in such a way that if you just click on your series, you can click on the series that you're on, and then it's only about 10 pages to go through. So here's a one-card outline for success in academia. If I had to put something in one card for a junior faculty member, Howard and I and Dean Gold would put this on: teaching. So teaching medical students and residents count as teaching. Residents and medical students are considered students as far as university is concerned. Teaching on North Campus is where you have a class like this. And I would teach this class, and I would teach it twice a week. And then every quarter I'd give you an exam, and at the midterm, I'd give you a midterm, and I'd give you a final exam and a paper. That's how North Campus works. On South Campus, where we work a lot with medical students and residents, the fact that you can demonstrate that you're teaching them and they're giving you teaching evaluations work. Research. There's really no hard number of publications that are required. We're always debating the quantity versus the quality. So 50 or 60 papers in very low-end journals are not as, maybe valued just as much as 10 to 15, 20 papers in very high-end journals. If you're a co-author and you've got more authors in the paper than you have subjects that you've studied, which I've seen, including rodents, if the rodents are subjects, those are handled differently. Research requirements are less rigorous in what's called the Clinical X and Clinical Health Science series. If you're in one of those two series, and I'll explain the differences between the two, the Clinical Health Science series is somebody who provides an extensive amount of clinical work for the university and teaching. They are not held to the same level of research requirements. They are expected to provide some scholarly or innovative work, but that could be in the realm of teaching, developing a new teaching program or a new residency program. The Clinical X series are for those people who do much more teaching than any other type of faculty member that would be required of. And this is a person who is a member of the Academic Senate. And I'll tell you what that is and whether that's important or not. But that's the difference between those two. Serving on a department or university committees are important. All of us on the faculty here that are senior, that have junior faculty members, we always advise junior faculty members to keep your service low. And our CAP supports that. We got to do a little service. But when you get started as an assistant professor, or you're just getting started to establish your career, what you would like to do is do something that you enjoy, but that doesn't take up a lot of your time. And so we don't, once you get promoted to an associate rank, then we want to see a lot more service. Then you're stuck. Then you got to start going to the curriculum review committees for the university, or you got to look at the esprit de corps committee for the university, or you got to serve on the sexual harassment committee for the university, or you got to, I mean, you know, you serve on the committee on committees. What a terrible term, but you can do that, okay? If you're a clinician, the patient care must be outstanding. And again, it's quality, not quantity. Don't put down on your CV how much you bill. Don't put down on your CV how many times you've been interviewed by ABC News. It doesn't count. So I'm going to spend a lot more time on the assistant professor level, or what's called the junior series, and then I'll highlight the differences of the other ones. So first of all, you really need to know your appointment. So there's an assistant professor. So a university that has an assistant professor without anything next to it, there's nothing after it, just assistant professor. That was what we would call a full-time equivalent appointment, or an FTE appointment. That's a tenure track appointment. When this person gets promoted to the associate level, the person has tenure. What is the definition of tenure? Well, they can't fire you. Wait a minute, I just told you. You can't fire you. Is that what you're saying? Because you are the university. What it means is that once you reach the associate level rank at that particular level, then the money, a portion of your salary, it's called the base, is paid by the state. And in California, we call it 19,900 funds. And those funds are guaranteed after the associate professor level, okay? So it's a tenure track. The term of service is 2 years or less, and the limit on the service is 8 years. Well, what the heck does that mean? Well, the term of service means that you serve for 2 years before you come up for a merit, because there are steps, and we'll go over the steps of each step. So every 2 years you have to get reviewed as an assistant professor. You also will have to get reviewed at your 4th year. That's called a 4th year appraisal. And that's just to look at whether you're going in the right direction and whether things are moving along. The appointment, the merits, which are every 2 years, are things that my committee doesn't review. That is what's handled within the school. But when you come up for your 4th year review, we review that. And we kind of give you feedback that says, yep, you're on the right trajectory, it looks like you can make tenure if you keep going, or we've got some weaknesses here. We want you to cut down on your teaching, or improve your teaching evaluations, or get you more grants, or publish more. Assistant professor in residence is a non-tenured appointment. Means there is no 19,900 funds. The state is not paying any part of your salary. The maximum term of the service is also 2 years. The limit on service is 8 years. So you'll hear this term called 8 years and out. 8 years and out. That means from the moment that your clock starts, when you start your appointment, your academic clock starts, and you've got 7 years to put your dossier forward for promotion to the next level. If you don't make the promotion to the next level, your position is terminated. So that's called 8 years or out, okay? An assistant professor in residence is evaluated exactly the same way as an assistant professor, as an FTE, exactly the same way. It's evaluated by CAP exactly the same way. You have to do the same amount of service, same amount of education, same amount of independence, same amount of funding, same amount of patient care. There's no difference between the two. The only difference is that one is tenured, or tenurable, with regards to guarantee of money from 1900 funds, and the other is not. Okay? An adjunct assistant professor is also a non-tenured appointment. Same as the others. It's 2 years maximum of appointment, 8 years of a limit on service. An adjunct appointment is different than the assistant professor appointments that are assistant professor or assistant professor in residence appointments, in that this individual is going to be primarily, it was originally crafted to be a teaching position. But the University of California, and especially UCLA, we've used it for people that do mostly research work. So they establish independence, they get their own grants, and they're required to to do that. And at the time that you put in your dossier, your department chair will say, this person is an adjunct professor because they do primarily research. Or this person is an adjunct professor because they do primary teaching. And we'll evaluate the dossier based on that. Okay? These people, they can serve on different types of committees for the university. They are typically either share mentoring with a graduate student. They're not the primary mentor for a graduate student, for example. But they are judged at a very different level and when they come up for promotion. But they're held at the same level in terms of 2 years and 8 years in service. Assistant Professor of Clinical X, as I said before, it's also non-tenure. It has a term of appointment of 2 years, 8 years of service. This is for an individual that is clinically doing an enormous amount of teaching. I mean, an enormous amount of teaching, and service and patient care, but does very, very little research. The Health Science Assistant Professor Clinical Series is non-tenured, the same numbers. This individual does primary clinical care and teaching, but they are not over the top with their teaching. That's the difference between those two. And the Clinical Health Science Assistant Professor and the Adjunct Assistant Professor, they are not members of the Academic Senate. Associate Professor is broken down exactly the same way that I just broke down the Assistant Professor. It's all exactly the same way. The only difference now is that if I'm in the regular track as an Associate Professor, there is no limit to my service. Okay? That's tenure. Then there's no limit on any of the term of service or the term of appointment. In residence, there's a maximum term of service of 2 years, but there's no limit on service. You can be an associate professor in residence for as long as you want, but your appointment has to be, your term of appointment is 2 years, and then you're reviewed for that next merit. Okay? Adjunct professor is the same as every 2 years. Professors, there's no limit on service. Clin-X is the same, as well as the health science. So you can be an associate professor or an adjunct professor, or an associate professor of Clin-X, or an health science associate professor for as long as you want, as long as you're reviewed at least every 5 years. But in terms of this, the term of appointment is 2 years, and you have to be renewed for that 2 years. Yeah?
Can you move from the residence designation to the tenure track?
Yes, you sure can. At any time. There are two things to remember. When we go through the steps and the normal chronological way things work, is that once you're an associate level, you can go up for promotion to once you're an assistant level, you can go up for associate at any time. You don't have to wait 7 years or 6 years. You can decide what you want to do. The department chair can say, I can't support it, but if you want to put it in, we'll put it in. But you can do it anytime you want to. If you're in the in-residence series and you want to become, in the tenure position, so that was something that happened to me. So I don't want to spill beans on somebody else, but I don't mind telling stories about myself. So I was in the in-residence position, and then I was promoted to associate professor in residence. And I was very happy that I got promoted to an associate professor in residence. But I informed my department chairman, at that time was Don Becker and Howard Reber, that I would like to see if I could compete for a tenured position someplace out there. And lo and behold, the University of Michigan said, Dave, we want you to come here, we'll make you tenure. So I looked at Michigan, Ann Arbor, beautiful, great football team. So I told Don and everybody else, I'm going to Michigan. I'm on my way, And I went for 3 trips, and we picked out the house and the labs and all that kind of stuff. And then I came back from on one trip, and then there was an envelope on my desk, and it was that you've been changed over to the in-residence, to the regular series. Okay? So it's a strategy that some people have used in order to make that move. There's only a certain number of what they call FTEs on campus. There's 1,700 here on campus. Those, I think, are still solid. They may become in jeopardy because of the changes that are going on in the state. But you can move. Conversely, you can move from any of these series across down or up or sideways. You're not locked in. So you may come up for review at one level and people say, you know, you really are acting more like a this. And so I can increase your salary or increase your stature in the university if you just find yourself in the right appointment. And then they may make some suggestions for you. But you control your own destiny. Professor is the same way. Only the difference here is you're reviewed every 3 years. Now, professors like myself, who are senior, if, say, I didn't want to get reviewed anymore, say I'm really happy at the level that I am and I don't want to be reviewed anymore, I have to be reviewed every 5 years. Every faculty member has to be reviewed every 5 years, even if you get stuck someplace. And there are consequences if you are not performing, or if you're not showing up for your classes, or if you're not doing any research. I mean, even though you have, quote, tenure, there are consequences, so you need to be careful with that. So here's just a table, an easy table to remember. So the series is on the left-hand side. And when you see, I just listed it as regular professorial. Regular just means assistant professor, associate professor, or full professor, as opposed to in residence or anything after. So it's tenured and it's a member of the Academic Senate, okay? Professor in residence is non-tenured, but it's also a member of the Academic Senate. So the reason I had that is when the historical perspective, when we decided to become a research university, which is different than a college. College is where you teach. University is where you actually do research and really big things. And you incorporate a medical school. You have research institutions that require faculties to support them. And so the university, UCLA and other campuses came up with this term for in residence. And this is where the individuals would get their own grants to support their own salary. So that's where that came from. So they are a member of the Academic Senate. An adjunct professor is not tenured and is not a member of the Academic Senate. Health Sciences series, they're not tenured, they're not a member of the Academic Senate. The clinics is a member of the Academic Senate. Well, what's so big about being a member of the Academic Senate? I would venture to ask you to go to any of your senior faculty members and ask them how many times they've attended a meeting of the Academic Senate. And it's very, very rare. It's just, for me, it's a wonderful institution. What it does is that it's a protective institution of the faculty. So it has places for tenure and privileges, faculty welfare. We discuss retirement programs. We discuss the athletic department's program in terms of who gets to sit where, and educational programs. There's a move by the business school that wants to become independent from the university. Yeah, is that right? Should we consider that? The medical center wants to have a new compensation plan for people that are in the Academic Senate. Should we consider that? You know, those. I mean, it goes. There's a lot of things you can do. Most clinicians and most scientists that are on South Campus are so doggone busy, they're not that worried. Okay, so one of the big things we're thinking about is combining some departments, because some departments like up on North Campus have gotten so small that we want to combine them. And that's created a lot of rift because some people want to become still independent, like Slavic languages, German, world health and culture. I mean, if you want to get involved in those debates, and those are wonderful. And you learn a lot, but I don't know if that's that big of a deal. So ranks and steps. So this has changed recently. Yes, question in the back.
Yes, sir. I had a question about the series. So besides the ability to be on the Academic Senate, are there any differences in terms of the series and your retirement benefits?
No. Not that I'm aware of. It's going to be changing now. People that have been appointed, I can't remember if it started this July or next July, but the contribution that you make towards your benefits will be higher because of the.
Depending on your series?
No,
Oh,
just in general. So you can get, there's a pre, Dean Hyde, I'm trying hard to remember this. There's a pre-Orion and a post-Orion. It's a company that was paying their corporate leaders extra money through some benefits with vacation time and, and that's how they would get these salaries way up. So they changed the way these things are actually being done. So there was a time where many universities now are having things that are before this judgment or after this judgment, but it affects all the series the same way. Anything else?
You said the assistant level is maximum is 8 years, but what is the step there?
Oh, I'm going to go for that. I'm going to just. I know. Don't worry about it. I'm going to do this. Okay. So we have rank and steps. All right. So I told you, okay, you're assistant professor. 2 years for each step, right? 8 years and out. Now, I'm not the smartest light bulb in the room. But you got 8 years divided by 2. You should have 4, right? How come there are 6 steps out there? Well, this wasn't my idea to make 6 steps, all right? But because we originally had 4, okay, but we added a couple. So some people are hired at different steps. Some people come in as a step 1. Some people are hired as a step 2. Some people are hired as a step 3. So your starting point could be different, all right? You could also get to, and that is, what is that dictated on? That's dictated on your experience after your degree. So residency, fellowship, postdoctoral experience, what does your dossier support? And then the appointment of the position is reviewed by CAP, and we say, yeah, that person can be a step 4 or step 5, something like that. At a certain particular point in time, a person, say, got involved, started at step 2, and they're not quite ready after step 4 to go up, and they want to spend a little more time, but they want a merit increase, so they want a little more increase in salary, and so they can be moved up on that steps, okay? After you are an assistant professor for 7 years, you put your dossier in to move up to the next level. This is regardless of the series, okay? You have to do this. And now at the associate level, now it's every 2 years. So every 2 years you come up for a merit. So you can go an associate professor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you would go to professor. Professor goes from 1 to 9. And it's 3 years at each. Don't ask me why it's 3 years. I don't know. But it's 3 years, okay? The things that we see on CAP are people that are, when you get your promotion, when you get your appointment, we see your dossier. When you go through your 4th year review, not after your step 4, just your 4th calendar review on campus, we see your dossier. When you go from assistant to associate, we see your dossier. When we go from associate to a professor, we see your dossier. When you go from professor 5 to professor 6, we see your dossier. Professor 6 is considered a very prestigious level. It is like the professor of professors, okay? When you get to be professor 9, I'm not professor 9, I'm professor 6. When you get to be professor 9, you can go what's called above scale. And then we see your, but these people are old, okay? I mean, they're old. But anyway, so that's, and we'll review that. And you can, now, can you skip steps? Yeah, sure. Those are called accelerations. Or say you got hired and you think that you are, if I can pick on Dr. Liu here for a minute, I got hired the same time Dr. Liu did in neurosurgery, and I'm a heck of a lot better than Dr. Liu is. First of all, I'm better looking than he is, and I've got more publications, and I think we need, I think I need to be a change here. That's called a merit. That's called a merit review. So I can be accelerated because of some award or some big thing that I've achieved. But if you think you're not being treated fairly, you can ask for a merit review, which is a merit review. And we look across the department that you're in of all the people that are like you, are you about the same level? And do we make adjustments? It's a longer period of time to do that process, but it's possible to do that. So who makes the decisions on appointments and promotions? So as I said before, the initial appointment goes up to CAP. So it goes through your department. Every department's a little different on how they vote. Some of them have their own appointments and promotion committee, or they may provide what's called an ad hoc report for the dossier. And then your department chairman will write a letter. And then it will go up to, it'll go to the dean's office, and the dean will write a letter. And then it will come up to APO, to our committee. That process will take a while. So those of you that were appointed, when you first got your first paycheck, you saw on the paycheck, visiting professor, and you freaked out. Because, wait a minute, time out. I thought this was an assistant professor or something, but it's a visiting professor. And the reason it's a visiting professor is because they haven't had time for it to go through all the little paperwork it's got to go through. You can stay a visiting professor for 3 years, and then you have to do something with the person. Okay, but they use it as kind of a holding thing. But your clock starts the date you signed your dossier for the appointment. And your academic clock starts at that particular point in time. Fourth year review, we see it. And it goes through the same process I just described: promotion to assistant to associate, associate to professor, and the merit increases that are associated with those come up. So there's the department, the dean, CAP, and then CAP. Although some people think that our committee is like the final committee, like we are Solomon. All we do is advise the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, or actually it's called Vice Chancellor for Academic Personnel, I think now. It used to be called Academic Affairs. And her name is Carol Goldberg, and she makes the final decision. So she can rule, she can tell us, you guys are stupid. You know, you guys don't really know what you're doing. We're not going to promote this person. Oh, we are going to promote this person, so that we can be overruled by that. Okay, and then there's a whole process. If the process did not go according to the way it's supposed to go, there's a whole process of you to appeal, and how you would appeal it. And you would get informed of a letter on what your appeal process would be, what the steps you would take to do that. It's all done above table. None of this is done underneath the table. It's all on top, and you can see you can look at your dossier at any time you want. Nothing goes into that dossier that you don't have the right to see. Okay. In my own personal dossier, I've tried to let as many people know that have written for me or evaluate me that I never have looked at my dossier, so that they can write or put down whatever they want to. But that's just me. Okay. If you're curious and you want to know what somebody wrote or what they did or what you got, you can certainly look at that. The letters they're didacted, which means that the letterhead and the signature at the bottom and anything below the signature is taken off the letter. The rest of the body of the letter is there for you to look at. And it doesn't take a Einstein, when you read the letter, to figure out, oh man, this is so-and-so that wrote this crummy letter, you know, or a good letter, whatever it is. But you can have access to those letters. You have the right to do that. Who makes the decisions on appointments and promotions? So for all merit step increases, this is from assistant professors from 1 to 4. Now you know it can also go up to 6. Okay. Associate professors 1 to 3 every 2 years. It can go up now to 5. And professors 1 through 5 and 6 through 9 every 3 years. These are departmental and what are called dean's final. We don't see these. We don't see these dossiers for these actions. The only times we begin to see these dossiers is when there is a acceleration that either goes across a step or across a barrier step or is above 2 years. 2 years above for acceleration, then we'll see it. So what is this crazy thing called the academic, or the Council on Academic Personnel, or CAP? So it's to advise the Vice Chancellor for Academic Personnel on personnel actions. We are an advisory capacity. We don't make the final decision. There are 14 of us that are appointed by the Academic Senate. 14. There are people on that committee from all parts of the university. Right now, I believe there are 4 of us from South Campus. And so if we get a dossier that is in a particular field that we feel we cannot cover appropriately in terms of our expertise on the committee, we will send that dossier out for what's called a RC, which is a review committee. And we will assign it to people within the university to review it who are experts in that particular field, okay? But generally speaking, from South Campus, the expertise on the committee is pretty well established. We've got clinicians and basic scientists and, you know, geeks, and so we pretty much can cover it. We review dossiers for specific actions, which I told you about. So what happens is there's a room, not quite as big as this, and a table, not quite as big as this, with 14 of us around, and then a cabinet with all these stacks of dossiers, one stack for each candidate. And we are assigned, each of us on the committee assigned a certain number to review in detail and present a brief report to the committee on what this individual is and what they do and what they don't do. But everybody else in the committee is required to read all the dossiers. So we read all the dossiers. And then we discuss them, one at a time, and then we vote. And then that vote gets sent up to the Vice Chancellor, okay? And the Vice Chancellor then, we can inform the Dean about the vote. So if the Dean, if we voted against the Dean, which could be for the candidate or against the candidate, if it doesn't agree with the Dean, we invite the Dean to visit. And then they can come and make an oral argument on their position. And most of the times they will invite the chair for that argument and that discussion. But that's at an invitation only. The final decision goes, cases going to CAP is the deans for most fourth-year appraisals and the vice chancellor for all others. So they'll make the final. They'll just say, okay, fine. How many times has that happened? So I've been on the committee for almost 3 years now. And I think we've had probably dean's visits. We get a lot more of them in the spring than we do in the fall because everybody's late in their dossiers. They always, you know, people are just late. They just don't get the dossier to us on time. And so we'll get more visits. And we'll probably have 10, 15, maybe 20 visits a year. I would say the majority of the visits are visits where they're trying to be an advocate for the candidate that's being considered. But a couple of times we'll have voted for the candidate and the dean has come up and said, no, you guys don't understand this, no. And they'll make an argument against it. And then we can decide whether we want to discuss it again and re-review it again. And that's up to us. And then we provide another recommendation to the Vice Chancellor. For the regular series and professor and resident series, their criteria for advancement in the regular and resident series are identical. So I've said that several times. So there's no difference in terms of how you're evaluated. If you're an MD, your primary responsibilities include patient care, but you also are required to do teaching, research, and university service, and that has to be divided by 3. So think about it, a third of your time for each. Do people get promoted because they happen to be a really good researcher and bring in lots of money to the university and are terrible teachers and stink in terms of service? Does that ever happen? I mean, really? A university wouldn't do that, would it? So generally speaking, the answer is, you'd be surprised. Very rarely does that happen. I've been on the committee now for 3 years, and we have sent dossiers back from people that have brought in an enormous amount of grants and have got some horrible teaching evaluations. And we say, you know, partner, you're not going anywhere until you can go out in the industry if you want to, but to be a part of this university, you're going to have to be a teacher, and your teaching evaluations have to be outstanding, okay? And your service has to be outstanding. So for the advancement on the primary emphasis in teaching, research, and creative work, there's somewhat less emphasis on the placement on patient care activity. Yeah, in university and public service for junior people. We still want the patient care to be good and recognized as being outstanding. But there is a movement afoot in the university to increase a little bit more emphasis on service to the university and to outside parts of the community. So we recognize diversity on this campus. So California, we voted down, blanking on the term. We, what do we call it when I protested for it? It was for anyway. So we can't make decisions based on race or gender, in terms of quota. Affirmative action. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we voted against affirmative action for the state of California. So what we do is we recognize people that do work, research, or teaching, or service in underprivileged or underrepresented populations. You don't get extra credit for it, but you are not punished because of that. In some cases, people that do work in that area, they may not get their publications in the most pristine journals, or they may have to travel to some weird place in the city, or they may have to diversify their thinking. And the committee does not want to punish them for that particular effort. So we recognize that and we applaud that. For the health sciences, clinical professor, or it used to be called the clinical professor compensated, the primary responsibilities are teaching and patient care. And for appointment and advancement, the emphasis is on clinical teaching and professional competence. You must contribute some creativity to either the administrative, academic, or research activities in their department. It's not that they have to be an independent investigator, but they have to contribute something that's creative. It can be a new teaching program, a resident program, a new evaluation process for fellows or residents. Yes?
Does the committee look at, as a whole, what percentage of like clinical teaching evaluations are outstanding? You know, as like for the entire hospital, you know, because you're basically saying that to advance, you need to be outstanding. So I'm just wondering, does that mean that that's promoting grade inflation, or like what percentage
Oh.
would you expect to be that way?
Yeah. So there is such a thing as grade inflation. I teach a class, and I can tell you right now that even though I sometimes don't give out very good grades, my teaching evaluations still are pretty good. But most classes on campus, they are computer evaluations. And people will score you on a certain 1 to 10 for different types of characteristics, and you come up with this number, okay? And the range is different. Each department has different teachings, so they'll have different ranges. And so usually the department chair or the dean's letter will say something about that, saying your teaching evaluations fall within the norm for this department, okay? And we get in the room, along with your dossier, I forgot to tell you this, we also have a copy of every paper that you've published. And we have a copy of every teaching evaluation. So any of the comments that the students have written are there, okay? So if there's a red flag that says, well, this person's got low teaching evaluations, maybe they're teaching an introductory course in mathematics or calculus, and they got 200 students and nobody likes the course anyway because it's a tough course and they give them bad, but they're getting better, you know, we take that into consideration. Residents usually have a numerical value that they give as well, and they'll also give some comments. But very rarely do students or residents or fellows lie. They're usually pretty honest.
So for clinical teaching, is that primarily the teaching that you do when you're on service, or does that also include symposia that you may give, or case conferences that you may give? So we're also
Yeah, yeah, it involves all of it.
all of that?
Yeah. So on the data summary sheet, you would have a list of courses that you teach, and then other teaching things, and those will involve things like symposia that you would give or grand rounds that you would give. Okay? Adjunct series are primarily either teaching or research. These are usually PhDs, not MDs, that fall into this. Teaching, so here's demonstrated evidence of high quality of teaching is essential. At UCLA, there's a great attention is paid to the faculty members' ability and achievement as a teacher. Teaching awards, we give out a lot of teaching awards. Textbooks, reports, circulars, or similar publications are considered teaching. And CAP considers all of those teaching evaluations, student, resident reviews. Sometimes students will write letters. Sometimes a course design will be done. Creative work, typically for you guys, this is going to be involving things that have to do with the number of publications and the prestige of the publications, and in your independence, your ability to get grants to support that work. And so it considers the quantity of the publications and the quality of the publications, and it considers their quality to be just as important. And we're pretty smart up there. We know the difference between a science paper and something else, or a cell paper or something else. I mean, we're there, and you can call it up on the website. You can find out what the impact factor is if you don't know it. So what is a major research publication? Peer-reviewed, independent piece of work. Must be reputable and a high impact factor. Journal, what's a high impact factor? Well, if you got an impact factor in the journal, that's a good thing. But you just got a number. That would be very helpful. Okay, but something above a 2 would be really good. Number of authors. We do a lot of collaborative work. We want to encourage collaborative work. But if the work it doesn't sound collaborative, but you've got 15 authors on the paper, that is ranked a little differently. Okay. We can smell out what are called honorary authorships. So those are people that have I'm the department chairman, so I belong on the paper because I'm the department chairman, even though they haven't done anything for the paper, or they've just paid for the data. Abstracts are not considered, opinion papers are not considered, synopsis of a lecture, so symposiums, things that you would write for a symposium is not considered, or case reports are considered, they're important, but they're considered less as important as research papers. Professional competence, it has to do with clinical interest, a new program, you could be the chief of a clinical effort. Invited talks to your specific field. Are you asked to speak? Regional or national recognition, or you serve on panels, on NIH study sections or on any study sections. Do other people recognize you as an expert in a particular field? University and public service. We talked a little bit about serving on committees for the Academic Senate, but this could be all kinds of things. It could be editorial reviews. You could be a reviewer for journals. You could be part of the department's review committee for residents, or you could be the safety officer for the labs in the department. So a fourth-year review, which most of you will be exposed to, is broken down into 3 potential votes. One is called favorable, meaning that everything's okay if you just keep going. You're probably going to make promotion to associate professor. With reservations means that, well, you're doing well, but there are a couple of things you got to work on. You got to get that new grant. If you're in the English department, you got to get that book out. You got to work on your teaching evaluations. Unfavorable means that you've really got some serious problems. And at this point, the committee has to make a decision whether it's unfavorable with continuing of employment or to terminate you. So this is pretty drastic. This is where you're not writing, you're not on campus, don't show up at your office. You know, this is pretty bad. The common reasons for less than favorable usually are insufficient academic productivity, so not enough publication or not enough prestigious publications. Poor teaching evaluations, or problems with collegiality, social interactions in the department. So somebody's written something that slid into the dossier that says that you're really difficult to work with, or this is a, you know. Professor of Clinical X, his primary responsibilities are teaching and clinical activity, and it's rare for an assistant professor to have one of those. Health Science Clinical Professor Series, predominant responsibilities again are clinical teaching and patient care, and who hold compensated positions in the School of Medicine or School of Dentistry or affiliated or associated hospitals or other institutions. Accelerations. So when you want to get accelerated, you go to the department chair and say, I want to be accelerated. So these are unusual accomplishments, major increases in responsibilities, major publications, multiple extramural or peer-reviewed funding awards. The department letter for the chair must clearly describe the justifications for acceleration. In my particular case, I have been accelerated, and I'm currently under review for an acceleration. What I did is I didn't decide I needed to be accelerated. Somebody told me I should be accelerated. They looked at my dossier and they said, you really should be accelerated. And so I would ask, well, what do you guys think I should do? And then they'll give you some feedback, and then that's what I did. But you can initiate it, okay? But I would strongly suggest that you talk to somebody and ask them, listen, if you want me to, I'll do it. If not, it's not a big deal. But let me know if I should do that. Deferred advancement. So a deferred advancement means that sometimes you're referred to as deferred merit for an increase or a deferred promotion. And all deferred merits are under the dean's authority. So CAP's review is not required unless it's requested by the candidate. So you defer something because you've reached a point to where you don't want to be considered for advancement right now. You like to hold it off. It can't be the 8-year limit that you're stuck with, but it could be for another advancement to a professor or at another rank. You need to justify the deferment. It could be any reasons. It could be personal. It could be programmatic. You've been working on this god dang mouse for the last 20 years and it hasn't come up yet, and you're still working on the genetic makeup. So there can be that. Off the clock, how you stop your clock. Okay, you do not need to put in your dossier the reasons for why you're stopping your clock. The university provides reasons. It's listed in the call. And in the call, you can stop your clock if you have a child under the age of 2. You can be a male or a female. Not to have the child, but I mean stop the clock. Okay? But you have to provide 50% of your time for care for that individual. Okay? So you can't say my wife's going to work 60% of the time taking care of the kids and only do 40% of the time. Then you're going to be in trouble if you're the man. So you got to be 50-50. You can stop the clock for illness in your family or for some other crisis that happens or an illness to you. But you do not, once that is approved, and there's a process for doing that, you do not have to put in your dossier the reasons for why you've stopped your clock. It makes no difference to us. So if you stopped your clock and it's now 9 years, we'll evaluate you as if you had worked for 7 years for those 9 years. It's a very, very above board. There are, I think we're split almost 50-50 in terms, no, we're not. We're probably 60-40, 40% women, 60% men on the committee. But it's neutral. It never comes up. In the old days, people were always worried, well, if I stop the clock, I'm not dedicated enough. That is so far wrong at this institution, you don't have to worry about it. We don't deal with salaries. A lot of people ask me that. Who decides my salary? I don't know what you make. It's not on your dossier. I'm not supposed to see it. And all I'm doing is I just review it from the standpoint of the academic merit. So if you don't get promoted to a level and your department chairman really likes you or thinks that you really be rewarded, they could pay you what's called off scale. They can pay you whatever salary they want to in terms of total negotiated salary. That's between you and your department chairman. That doesn't involve us. At other campuses, they look at salary, like UC Santa Cruz or UC Santa Barbara, I believe. I think UCSF does this. I don't think USCSF does. But some campuses do look at salary. So, and we just know that the salaries go with the market value. So the business school, Department of Economics, some of those salaries get pretty big. If you're a transplant surgeon, some of those salaries get to be pretty big. If you teach Slavic languages, or you teach poetry from Iceland, which is a really important topic, you know, maybe your salary's not quite as big as that. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I guess I went 10 minutes over.
That's okay, thanks, Dr. Hovda. Really outstanding presentation. I wonder if any of the group at Harvard that didn't get an opportunity to ask, they're still there. Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Hovda? It was really a fantastic overview, and I really learned a lot from it. There are many, many subtleties here, so if you have any questions, I think I would say, first of all, virtually everything that's been described originates in your department and will eventually emanate from your department. So your department chair and other folks in the department would be your principal consultants, but we in the dean's office also are always available anytime for questions if we can be of help. Thanks very much. Great
Thank you.
presentation.
Thanks.